Hey, welcome to Dan's Model Works, and it is part 5 of our Mighty Condor by Trumpeter, 1/48 scale, and I've been kind of jumping back and forth between different projects lately. Didn't exactly plan it that way, but that's what's been happening. But anyway, the last time we did anything on the Condor, get rid of this thing, we glued our fuselage halves together, thus trapping our lights and everything in there, and somewhere around here there should be a battery. There's the battery right there, and that enables us to light up the inside. And the ventral gondola is not glued on, but rather it is held on with a nut and a rare earth magnet underneath there. And the battery will eventually live in this area here. And there's the switch to turn the lights on. Of course, it hasn't been wired up yet. So one of the first things we need to do this time around is to start addressing our fuselage join seam. It came together pretty good, not perfect. There's some areas where there was a little bit of glue squeeze out. There's some areas where there's a slight gap. So I'm going to lightly sand it first, and then probably apply a little bit of putty. I had a small change in plan. Instead of immediately grabbing the sandpaper, what I did, using the chisel blade as well as a number 11 blade here, what I did is I basically scraped the high side of the seam, because oftentimes while you're trying to sand down the high side of the seam, you end up sanding the low side as well. Whereas at least if you're using a blade, you can kind of keep most of your erosion on the high side. Now, some of the rivets did end up disappearing, and so I ended up using this very, very fine drill bit, the size of which escapes me at the moment. I think it's 1/64. But anyway, I just set that where each rivet was and gave it a quick twist in order to restore it. If we move here in front of the, you can see this area has been scraped down. It still will require a little bit of putty. Up here has not yet been done. You can see there's a little bit of a lip there. So I'm hopefully going to plane most of that down before I resort to using any putty. So here's the lower seam after I've tried to put a very, very small amount of putty on there. Hopefully all of this will end up sanding off pretty quickly without having to lose a bunch of detail. And here's the nose. I've already scraped the putty along the spine, and I've already sanded and basically reinstated any rivet marks that, try focusing on there. Yeah, I haven't yet re-drilled these rivet marks, but I have here. Hopefully I can get this done and move on to the next step. So I've gone all along my seam, and hopefully you can see that I've restored any rivets and any panel lines that tended to have gotten washed out while I was doing the sanding. Probably not perfect, but I think it looks pretty good. Did the underside as well. And of course these white pieces of styrene here, they were holding the floor together. Because for some reason or other, Trumpeter gave you an overlapping plate here at the front between the two segments, but didn't really give anything at the last joint. So I can finally start working on bringing the center section and mounting it up underneath here. As I believe I've mentioned earlier, one of my viewers in a comment mentioned that the center section of this kit is rather weak, and you can see that right here. There's quite a bit of flex, and he had said that there's a piece available for reinforcing it, and probably the easy thing would be to order that piece, but I think I can probably reinforce it myself. Now, theoretically, the best way to do this would be to put a piece of styrene across here with the exact contour of the plane. And I was going to try to do that, but I think what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to run a strip from here to here. I'm going to glue the ends on. And then once it dries, I'm going to glue 2 or 3, probably 3 tabs going down to make contact to the underside of the wing. And then that way it won't be a solid piece running along, but at least it'll have 5 points of contact. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that will end up creating I suppose, a primitive beam going all the way across that'll hopefully take away a lot of this flexibleness. And it'll go all the way from here to here, which hopefully will get rid of most of this flexing. He said as he snaps one side completely off. So I think I'm going to run the beam pretty much the full length I have available, or darn close to it. And if we look here, you can see how much of a gap there is underneath the beam. And I was a little bit worried that maybe the beam would interfere with the wing going together. So I've got the outer segment here of this particular wing, and if I can get it together, it actually goes together quite easily. But I'm trying to do it on camera, so when you realize just how thick this wing is, and if we, oh yeah, I'm not going to have any clearance issues here. I've incorporated a very slight taper at either end of my, may as well call it, wing spar. So that way I'm not trying to just make contact with a little tiny patch at the very end. I'll at least have maybe about an inch or so making contact with the underside of the wing. I've started gluing my spar in, and as you can see, or hopefully you can see, I've glued about an inch at this end, about an inch at this end. Right now I still have a gap in the middle, which is what we want. I also tied it into the pieces of styrene in our wheel wells. If you didn't do this step, you could probably just glue it to the back of this big beefy gray part here. The next step I'm going to do is I'm going to put another piece of styrene going basically from here down to the very bottom of the belly here, in order to create basically a very long, thin triangle on each side of the plane. And hopefully that will take most of the flex out of the center section, while at the same time maintaining the dihedral that should be in the wings. And hopefully I haven't changed it too much. Continuing our reinforcement, you can see that I've put a leg basically from the middle of our spar down to the belly here. And I actually cut that slightly longer than it looked like it should have been, mainly because I felt as this was sitting on the workbench, it was having a tendency to want to flatten out. So I figured if I made it slightly longer and added a bit of dihedral back in, I was probably going to be safe. And then looking on the back side, you can see I've got another couple legs right here. Now I didn't put these in until this dried. And I just basically cut them to length, glued them to the underside of the wing, and then glued them here. I didn't really try to push or pull or anything like that. I just left it with the shape that it had just naturally taken. Now, you saw how flexible it was earlier. Now you can see I can still flex this, but it's not floppy like it was before, because it was really, really flimsy. So I suppose whatever the part is that you can buy probably followed the contour of the wing perfectly. But I think this is just as effective. And I don't know, maybe it was a much thicker spar, because there certainly is enough vertical space in there that you get away with something. But I think this will do. And the nice thing is it ties the landing wells, the landing gear wells together, because that's where the weight is going to be taken when it sits on display. So instead of this having to take the weight, this is now taking the weight directly from side to side. So I think it was worth the effort. Just doing a little test fitting here, and we seem to fit pretty good back here. And shape-wise, we're good at the front. But overall, we're, maybe a millimeter longer than we should be. See, if I bend the whole thing, I can get it to go in. It puts a lot of stress here at the back. So I might rub down the front and see if I can make that fit in a little bit better. I'm just going to do a little bit of filing here at the front. Because if we look at it, there's a little bit of a lip here anyway. So we'll try to take away the excess from this part of the panel rather than the rear. Well, I think we're just about out of glue in our Plasti-Weld Flexifile here. So I've got a fresh bottle. For some reason or other, they never give you any brush in these things. So I'm always moving the old brush over to the new bottle. While test fitting the wing center section, I noticed that the wing itself, once you got it in place, tended to want to sit a little deeper than the fuselage itself. So I added these tabs just to keep the wing from trying to bottom out and to keep it in the same plane as the belly of the plane. I've drilled a small hole just forward of the switch in the vicinity of where the battery pack is going to go, and that way I can bring my wires out to the battery pack. So I've just been taking care of a few details before we glue everything together. As you can see, the battery container is now underneath the plane. The wires are going through the wing center section, and of course the switch has been wired up. And I didn't want to put a piece of electrical tape on here because I figured it would just fall off. And it looks like those are bare, but actually what I did is I just took some of my liquid latex that I use for making molds and I just slathered it all over there. And that should hopefully keep it from making contact with anything. It seemed like a good idea at the time, probably wasn't. So we're getting close to putting the center section in place. Okay. We have the center section mounted. Starting to look a little bit more plain-like. This isn't a bad join. There's a little bit of filling I'm going to have to do on the wing root there. A little bit of sanding on this one. And there is a bit of an edge I'm going to have to deal with here. But not too bad, really. One thing that was not expected, if I put my gondola on, you can see that we have a bit of a gap here now. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to rub down the middle of the gondola housing and see if we can get that to sit on there a little bit better. There's a bit of rock to it. Just test fitting the upper outer wing panel here, and I've noticed that there's not a whole lot that's keeping this from moving out of alignment here. See how there probably should be a little bit of a lip or something for this to come up against. So what I'm going to do is, before I glue these on, I'm going to add a lip that the top of the wing can can bear on and can grip on. I think that'll make it a much stronger joint and make the alignment much easier. I ended up putting the plastic tab on the underside of the outer part of the wing, mainly because there's not a good flat surface inside here, which is probably why they didn't mold it in plates. So I'm thinking I'm going to bite the bullet and glue this wing on. This thing is so big I have to struggle to get good camera angles here, especially without knocking any glue over. I've started off by gluing together the wing root because that's going to be the part that's most noticeable if it's wrong. And then I've started on the leading edge. I'm just basically going to do a little bit at a time, once again using my Flexifile because it really sets up as fast as super glue. So you can do a small section, clamp it with your hand, know that you've got it right, and then you can move on to the next segment. So I'm going to work my way along and back to the back edge of the wing. And there is our upper wing panels installed. I still have to do the outer lower wing panels, and they basically go from here outwards. And the fit wasn't too bad. This side was pretty good. You can just see there's a very small gap. And on this side, it's a little bit longer. I plan on using a little bit of white glue to fill those gaps. And there's a couple other spots that need to be rubbed down. And this area right here is going to require a little bit of TLC. It's not quite as bad on the other side. And of course you can see the outer wing panels that still need to be put on. Let's try focusing. That's better. Damn, this thing is big. Holy crap. So, that's all I'm going to do this week. At least it's starting to look like an airplane now, as opposed to a tube. So, thanks for watching Dan's Model Works, and until next time, just keep on modeling.